Admiral Therian Vax stood at the command deck of the Celestial Aegis, her forearms gripping the railings as she watched the Drachnid fleet darken the skies above Haven's Gate. The colony's shield grid flickered under the relentless bombardment, a tapestry of purple energy struggling against the void-black projectiles of the enemy. "Status report," she commanded, her crystalline voice carrying across the bridge despite its softness. The Meridian crew, a mixture of various Confederation species, worked with practiced efficiency. "Shield grid at 38%, Admiral," reported Commander Ixtol, his insectoid mandibles clicking with tension. "Ground forces report multiple breaches in sectors 7 through 12. The Drachnid ground forces are," he paused, compound eyes dimming, "they're unlike anything we've encountered before." Theria had seen the reports. The Drachnids weren't just an enemy, they were a force of nature. Biomechanical horrors that consumed everything in their path, converting organic matter into more of their kind. Their ships weren't built, they were grown. Their weapons weren't forged, they were bred. "The human contingent," she asked, though she felt foolish even considering it. The Confederation had accepted Earth into their alliance mere months ago, and their contribution to Haven's Gate's defense consisted of a single battle group. What could one human fleet do against the darkness that had consumed dozens of worlds? There, Ixtal's antennae twitched in confusion. "They're requesting permission to deploy their Guardian units, Admiral." Theria's secondary heart skipped a beat. She had heard whispers about these Guardians during the diplomatic exchanges. The human representatives had been peculiarly tight-lipped about their capabilities, speaking only of specialized intervention units. "Granted," she said, surprising herself with the speed of her response. "What do we have to lose?" The response came not from her crew, but from the main view screen. A transmission from the human flagship, the HSS Avalon. Their commander, Captain Sarah Winters, appeared on screen. Her dark skin contrasted sharply with the silver of her uniform, but it was her eyes that caught Theria's attention. They burned with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. "Admiral Nvax," Winters spoke, her voice carrying an undercurrent of what Theria would later recognize as anticipation. "Guardian deployment commencing. Recommend you pull your ground forces back 2 kilometers from current engagement lines." Before Theria could respond, her tactical officer called out in alarm. "Multiple high-velocity objects launching from human ships. They're heading straight for the surface." Through the viewscreen, Theria watched as hundreds of streaks of blue fire descended through Haven's Gate's atmosphere. She expected them to be missiles or some form of bombardment, but their trajectory was too controlled, too precise. By the first light, Ixtal whispered, "Those are people." The realization hit Theria like a gravitational wave. The humans were sending their soldiers into combat via orbital drop, straight through a war zone, directly into the heart of the Drachnid swarm. It was either the bravest or most foolish thing she had ever witnessed. That's when the real show began. The drops hit the ground in synchronized ways, and from each impact point emerged figures in armor that seemed to drink in the light itself. They moved with impossible speed, wielding weapons that defied conventional military doctrine. Where the Confederation forces had struggled with heavy artillery and energy weapons, these Guardians fought with what appeared to be modernized melee weapons wreathed in energy fields. And they were winning. "Impossible," breathed Commander Ixtol as they watched the tactical feeds. A single Guardian had just bisected a Drachnid siege engine with what appeared to be a sword, the blade burning with blue fire that ate through the creature's biomechanical hide like it was paper. Theria watched in stunned silence as the tide of battle shifted. The Guardians moved in perfect synchronization, their movements almost choreographed. Where they went, the Drachnid advance not only stopped, it reversed. For the first time since the war began, the enemy was retreating. "Captain Winters," Theria called out, her voice barely steady. "What exactly are we witnessing?" The human captain's smile held both pride and gravity. "Admiral, you're witnessing why there is no direct translation for the human word guardian in any Confederation language. Some concepts can only be understood through demonstration. As Theria watched the battle unfold below, she realized that humanity hadn't joined the Confederation as another member species. They had arrived as something else entirely, and the galaxy would never be the same. The aftermath of Haven's Gate left the Confederation Council in chaos. Theria stood before the assembled representatives, her hologram flickering slightly as she delivered her report. The circular chamber, with its hundreds of species represented, had never been so silent. The human guardians didn't just repel the Drachnid forces, she stated, her 4 hands gesturing to the battle footage playing behind her. They fundamentally changed the nature of our conflict. We need to understand what we're dealing with, both in our enemies and our allies. The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices until Sovereign Delegate Myrax, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, called for order. Captain Winters, please step forward. Sarah Winters approached the center of the chamber, her silver uniform now adorned with the medals from Haven's Gate. The Guardian Protocol wasn't developed as a weapon, she began, her voice carrying an authority that silenced the remaining whispers. It was born from necessity. The display behind her shifted to show the internal workings of Guardian armor. Humanity discovered something during our own wars of unification. That consciousness itself could be weaponized, not through crude psychic manipulation, but through what we call the resonance. Theria watched as the council members leaned forward, their attention captured by the implications. The footage showed Guardian units moving in perfect synchronization, their weapons leaving trails of blue energy that seemed to ignore conventional physics. Every human has a minimal connection to the resonance, Winters continued. But Guardians are different. They don't just connect to it, they embody it. Each Guardian unit is a perfect fusion of human consciousness, advanced technology, and what your scientists might call quantum entanglement. And the weapons? Asked a Volari representative, their phosphorescent skin pulsing with curiosity. We've seen them cut through Drachnid bio-armor like it wasn't there. Winters nodded to her aide, who activated a new hologram. A Guardian's blade materialized in the center of the chamber, rotating slowly. We call them resonance edges. They don't just cut, they sever the bonds between matter at a quantum level. The blue energy you see isn't decoration. It's the visual manifestation of reality being locally rewritten. The chamber erupted again, this time a mixture of awe and fear. Theria understood both reactions. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just developed better weapons, they'd found a way to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. But there's a cost, Winters said, her voice growing solemn. Each Guardian sacrifices something of themselves to maintain this connection. The deeper they go into the resonance, the harder it becomes to return. We've lost good people not to enemy fire, but to the void between thoughts. The room fell silent again, but this time with understanding. Every species present had its own stories of sacrifice for power, of prices paid for survival. What you witnessed at Haven's Gate was only a fraction of our capability, Winters concluded. But we need your help. The Drachnids aren't just another enemy, they're an abomination in the fabric of space-time itself. Our Guardians can sense it. Whatever created them did so by breaking rules that should never have been broken. Theria stepped forward. The Drachnids adapt to everything we throw at them. How can we be sure they won't adapt to this? Winters smiled, but there was steel behind it. Because the resonance isn't a weapon, Admiral. It's the universe's immune system, and we're its antibodies. The Drachnids aren't just fighting us, they're fighting reality itself. And reality, she paused, looking each council member in the eye, reality always wins. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment before Sovereign Delegate Myrax spoke. Captain Winters, the Confederation would like to formally request the deployment of Guardian units across all major fronts. We will provide whatever support you require. As the council session ended, Theria approached Winters privately. "There's something you're not telling them," she said, not a question but a statement. Winter's expression didn't change, but her eyes took on that otherworldly intensity again. "The Guardians didn't just drive the Drachnids back at Haven's Gate, Admiral. They learned something that changes everything we thought we knew about this war." "And what's that?" "The Drachnids aren't invading our space," Winters whispered. "They're running from something worse, and it's following them." The Centauri outpost hung in space like a gleaming jewel, its spiral arms stretching out into the void. But today, those arms bristled with weapons. In the command center, Admiral Therian Vax stood beside Captain Winters, watching as the combined fleet took position. "Tell me again what we're looking for," Theria said, her crystalline voice tight with tension. Winters gestured to the quantum display, where Guardian sensor data painted a disturbing picture. Reality itself seemed to be fraying at the edges of known space, creating what the humans called void tears. "The Drachnids aren't just running," Winters explained. "They're trying to seal something behind them. Every world they consume, every species they harvest, it's all fuel for a barrier they're attempting to create." Guardian Commander Maya Chen appeared on the bridge, her armor a midnight blue that seemed to absorb nearby light. Unlike the ceremonial uniforms of the Confederation, Guardian armor was worn like a second skin, each piece resonating with its wearer's consciousness. "The void tears are expanding," Maya reported, her voice carrying that distinct harmonics all Guardians possessed. "What's worse, we're picking up Drachnid signatures unlike anything we've seen before. They're evolving." The tactical display confirmed her words. The approaching Drachnid fleet wasn't just larger, it was different. Their bioships had taken on new configurations, with structures that seemed to punch through local spacetime itself. "They're adapting to the resonance," Winters said grimly. "But that's not the worst part. Maya, show them what your team discovered." Maya activated her armor's projection system, and the command center filled with a three-dimensional map of Drachnid movements across the galaxy. But behind their advance was something else, areas of space that simply ceased to exist. "We're calling it the null space," Maya explained. "It's as if something is unwriting reality itself. The Drachnids aren't invaders, they're refugees, trying to build a wall of consumed biomass between us and that." Theria's secondary heart beat faster as she processed the implications. "How do we fight something that unmakes reality?" "We don't," Winters said, "but we might be able to contain it. The Guardians aren't just warriors, they're anchors, keeping local reality stable through the resonance. If we can establish enough Guardian nexus points." The station's alert system cut through their discussion. The Drachnid fleet had arrived, but something was wrong. Their usual attack pattern had changed. Instead of their typical overwhelming force, they were moving with precision, purpose. "They're targeting our Guardian units specifically," Maya realized. "They've recognized the threat we pose to their mission." The battle that followed would be remembered as the Centauri Crucible. Guardian units deployed in new formations, creating overlapping fields of stabilized reality that the Drachnids couldn't easily corrupt. But the enemy had learned. Their bioships launched weapons that seemed to phase between dimensions, seeking gaps in the Guardians' defenses. Maya led her unit in a desperate counterattack, their resonance edges carving through void-touched biomass. But for every ship they destroyed, two more emerged from tears in space. The Confederation fleet provided covering fire, their conventional weapons seemingly less effective with each passing moment. "The barrier between spaces is collapsing," Maya reported, her voice strained as she maintained her unit's resonance field. "Captain, we need to make a decision. We can hold this position and possibly lose everything, or what, Commander? Or we can show them why humanity chose to become Guardians in the first place. But there's no guarantee all of us will come back." Winters looked at Theria, then back to Maya. "Do it." Maya's response was to unleash what the Guardians called the Deep Strike Protocol. Every Guardian unit present synchronized their resonance fields, creating a cascade effect that momentarily stabilized all local spacetime. In that perfect moment of clarity, they struck. What followed defied description in any known language. The Guardians didn't just fight the Drachnids, they rewrote the laws of physics around them. Ships that had phased between dimensions were forced into singular states. Weapons that bent reality found themselves binding to conventional laws of physics. But the cost was visible. Several Guardians simply vanished, lost to the spaces between spaces. Others emerged changed, their armor bearing marks of exposure to realities that should not exist. As the battle ended and the survivors regrouped, Theria approached Maya, who stood silently observing the aftermath. "Your people knew," Theria said. "You knew what was coming, didn't you? That's why humanity developed the Guardian Protocol in the first place." Maya's helmet retracted, revealing eyes that seemed to see through multiple layers of reality at once. "We didn't know exactly what was coming, but we knew something was. Humanity's greatest gift isn't our technology or our connection to the resonance. It's our ability to prepare for threats we can barely imagine." The aftermath of the Centauri Crucible left scars not just in space, but in the psyche of every species involved. The Confederation Council chambers, once a place of measured debate, now felt like a war room. Emergency sessions had become the norm, and today's revelation threatened to shatter what remained of their unity. "The null space is accelerating its advance," Maya reported to the assembled delegates, her Guardian armor still bearing the ethereal marks from the battle. "The Drachnids aren't just running anymore, they're desperate, and desperate enemies make mistakes we can exploit." But not everyone was convinced. High Commander Vexthor of the Arcturus Defense Force slammed his biomechanical appendage on the council table. "You speak of exploitation, yet your Guardian forces suffer losses with each engagement. How many did you lose at Centauri? How many more must vanish into your precious resonance before you admit this strategy is failing?" Winters stepped forward, her silver uniform now bearing the marks of multiple campaigns. "Every Guardian knows the risks, High Commander. But while we lose ships and soldiers, you're losing entire systems to the Drachnid advance." The tension in the room was palpable. The Confederation's pride had been wounded, not just by the Drachnid threat, but by their dependence on human intervention. Some species had begun developing their own versions of Guardian technology, with catastrophic results. "Show them," Maya said quietly to Winters. "They need to understand." Winters nodded and activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed the failed attempts by other species to replicate the Guardian Protocol, twisted bodies and shattered minds, the result of forcing connections to the resonance without the unique adaptations humanity had developed over generations. "This isn't about pride or technological superiority," Winters explained. "The Guardian Protocol works because humanity spent centuries unconsciously preparing for it. Our wars, our conflicts, our endless drive to push boundaries, they all led to a species-wide adaptation that allows us to touch the resonance without being consumed by it." Theria, who had remained silent until now, rose from her seat. "Then what would you have us do? Stand aside while humanity fights our battles?" "No," Maya interjected. "We need you to fight differently. The Drachnids adapt to direct confrontation, but they struggle against unpredictable variables. Your species, all of you, think differently than humans. You see patterns we miss, develop strategies we'd never consider. We don't need you to be Guardians, we need you to be yourselves." The display shifted to show a new tactical overlay. "This is Operation Prism," Maya continued. "A combined arms strategy that uses Guardian units as anchors while Confederation forces exploit the stabilized zones we create. We don't fight as one force, we fight as many, each playing to our strengths." The plan was audacious. Guardian units would establish reality anchors, points in space where the laws of physics remained constant despite Drachnid interference. Within these zones, Confederation forces could operate at full effectiveness, their conventional weapons and tactics unhindered by the enemy's reality-warping capabilities. But the real innovation came from an unexpected source, a mycelium scientist, implementing their species' natural understanding of interconnected systems, had developed a way to use the Guardian's resonance fields as a form of FTL communication. The breakthrough meant that for the first time, they could coordinate attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. "There's something else," Winters added, her voice growing grave. "We've detected a pattern in the null space advances. It's not random entropy, there's intelligence behind it. The Drachnids aren't just running from chaos, they're running from something that thinks." The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The idea that something could exist in the unspace between realities, something conscious enough to pursue the Drachnids across galaxies, changed everything they thought they knew about the nature of existence itself. "How do we know this?" Vexthor demanded. "What proof do you have?" Maya's armor shifted, displaying patterns of energy that seemed to move in impossible ways. "Because it's trying to communicate. Through the resonance, through the void tears, through the very fabric of reality itself. It's reaching out, not to destroy, but to transform." The chamber erupted in discussions, but Therian noticed something else. The marks on Maya's armor weren't battle damage. They were changing, evolving, as if responding to unseen frequencies. The Guardian commander was serving as a living conduit to whatever existed beyond the veil of normal space. "We don't have much time," Maya announced, her voice carrying harmonics that made several species' translation devices malfunction. "The Drachnids aren't the true threat, they're just the harbingers. What follows them will either end our existence or transform it forever. We need to decide, here and now, whether we face it divided by pride or united in purpose." The void between Proxima Centauri and its nearest neighbor burned with unnatural light. Reality itself seemed to fold and unfold like origami made of starlight, as Guardian units established a massive resonance field unprecedented in scale. At its center, the HSS Avalon hung in space, its hull modified with experimental quantum stabilizers. Maya stood on the bridge, her armor now completely transformed. The original midnight blue had given way to patterns that shifted between dimensions, making it difficult for even other Guardians to look at her directly. She had become something new, a bridge between realities. "Contact in 5 minutes," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's quantum sensors fluctuate. "The null space entity is responding to our signal." Captain Winters sat in her command chair, monitors showing the massive Confederation fleet holding position at the edge of the resonance field. They were the last line of defense if everything went wrong. Admiral Theria's flagship, the Celestial Aegis, led the formation. "The Drachnids have changed course," Theria's voice came through the quantum comm. "They're retreating from this sector entirely." "They know what's coming," Maya said. "They've been running from it for so long, they'd forgotten why they started running in the first place." The ship's sensors began to scream as reality buckled. Through the viewscreen, they watched as space itself parted like a curtain, revealing something that defied description. It wasn't a ship or a being in any conventional sense. It was a pattern, a thought-given form, a question asking itself. Maya stepped forward, her armor resonating with the entity's presence. "It's not here to destroy us," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's here to evolve us. The Drachnids, they refused the transformation. They chose to consume and convert others rather than face change themselves." Through the quantum comm, they could hear the panic in the Confederation fleet as their sensors tried to make sense of what they were seeing. But Winters remained calm, watching as Maya established a first direct communication with the entity. The bridge of the Avalon transformed, reality shifted, and they found themselves standing in what appeared to be multiple places at once, a quantum superposition made manifest. The entity communicated not in words or images, but in possibilities. "It's showing us potential futures," Maya translated, her consciousness expanded by her modified armor. "Paths of evolution that the Drachnids rejected. They chose to remain static, unchanging except through consumption. But we have the capacity to grow, to transform while remaining ourselves." Winters watched as these potential futures played out before them. Humanity's Guardian Protocol wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was the first step toward a greater transformation. The resonance wasn't just a weapon or a tool, it was an invitation. The Drachnids aren't evil, Maya continued, her understanding growing with each moment of contact. They're afraid of losing themselves to change. Their entire civilization is built on preserving what they are by consuming what they aren't. Through the quantum comm, Varia's voice came through, filled with awe and concern. What is it offering us? A choice, Winters replied, watching as Maya communicated with the entity. The same choice it offered the Drachnids. We can embrace transformation, learn to exist in multiple states of reality at once, or we can run like they did, Maya finished. But running isn't just refusing to change, it's actively destroying the possibility of change for others. That's why the Drachnids consume everything in their path. They're trying to create a reality where transformation is impossible. The entity's presence intensified, and with it came understanding. The Guardian Protocol wasn't humanity's invention. It was their unconscious response to the entity's call across space and time. They had been preparing for this moment for their entire history. We need to make a decision, Maya said, her form now barely holding to single-dimensional space. The entity can't stay here long. Reality itself can't handle its full presence. We either accept its offer now, beginning a transformation that will change everything we are, or we join the Drachnids in running, Winters finished. And eventually, we become what we've been fighting. The bridge crew looked to their captain, while through the quantum comm, the Confederation leaders waited in tense silence. This wasn't just a military decision, it was an evolutionary one. The next step in consciousness itself. Winters stood from her command chair, her eyes fixed on the shifting patterns of possibility before them. Maya, tell it we accept. But on one condition, we do this together, as allies, not as subjects. The Confederation, humanity, all of us. The entity's response was immediate. The resonance field expanded, encompassing the entire fleet, and reality began to change, not breaking or tearing, but evolving, taking everyone with it into something new, something more. 1 year after the contact event, Earth's orbital rings gleamed with new purpose. The transformed architecture of human civilization now reflected their evolved state of existence, structures existing simultaneously in multiple phases of reality. At the newly established Quantum Concordat headquarters, the former Confederation Council had taken on a very different appearance. Admiral Therian Vax, her crystalline form now capable of shifting between dimensional states, addressed the assembled representatives. Her forearms traced patterns in quantum space as she spoke, creating visual echoes that carried additional layers of meaning. The Drachnid fleets have been contained, she announced, her voice resonating across multiple frequencies of existence. Not through destruction, but through understanding. They're beginning to see what they've been running from isn't death, but transcendence. Captain Winters, though that title seemed inadequate now, stood beside her. The silver of her uniform had become living light, responding to the quantum fluctuations of her evolved consciousness. The first Drachnid elements have accepted transformation. They're learning to exist in harmony with the changes they once feared. Maya, who had become something far beyond a guardian commander, manifested in the chamber. Her presence existed as both wave and particle, a living embodiment of quantum possibility. But we face new challenges. The transformation isn't uniform across all species. Each civilization is evolving along its own path, creating a complexity we never imagined possible. The chamber itself shifted, displaying the current state of known space. Regions once ravaged by Drachnid consumption now bloomed with new forms of life and consciousness. The resonance, once merely a tool of the Guardian Protocol, had become the foundation of a new way of existing. We're not just changing physically, Maya explained, her form rippling with possibility. We're evolving new ways of thinking, new ways of being. The barriers between individual consciousness are becoming permeable. This was the greatest challenge they faced. As species evolved beyond their original forms, questions of identity and sovereignty took on new meaning. What did borders mean when beings could exist in multiple spaces simultaneously? What was individuality when consciousness could be shared across quantum states? The entity, Winter said, didn't just give us an evolutionary path, it gave us responsibility. We're becoming the custodians of reality itself, learning to maintain the balance between what was and what could be. Through the quantum displays, they could see the ongoing transformation of their civilization. The Guardian Protocol, once a military necessity, had become a framework for controlled evolution. Humanity's unique adaptation to change had made them natural leaders in this new era, but not as conquerors or rulers, as guides. But we haven't lost who we are, Theria added, her form crystallizing momentarily into its original state. That was the Drachnid's fear. That change meant the death of identity. We've proven them wrong. We've shown that evolution doesn't erase what we were, it builds upon it. Maya's presence expanded, sharing a direct experience of the quantum reality they now inhabited. The assembled representatives saw their own civilizations not as they had been, but as they were becoming, a vast, interconnected web of consciousness and possibility, each strand unique, but part of a greater whole. The word guardian has taken on new meaning, Maya said, her consciousness touching each being in the chamber. We're no longer just protecting reality from destruction. We're nurturing its evolution, guiding it toward possibilities we're only beginning to understand. Winter stepped forward, her form shifting through multiple states of being. The entity didn't choose us because we were perfect. It chose us because we were ready to be imperfect together. Our willingness to face change, to risk everything for growth, that's what set us apart from the Drachnids. The chamber resonated with shared understanding. The fear that had driven the Drachnids to consume galaxies had been transformed into a force for creation. The very weapon they had tried to build, a barrier against change, had become a bridge to new forms of existence. We stand at the dawn of something unprecedented, Theria concluded. Not an empire of space and matter, but a symphony of consciousness and possibility. The legacy we're creating isn't one of steel and fire, but of evolution and harmony. As the session ended, Maya, Winters, and Theria stood together, their forms shifting between states of being. Through the quantum field that now connected all transformed species, they could feel the pulse of civilization changing, growing, becoming something more than the sum of its parts. There still isn't a translation for guardian in any language, Maya observed, her presence rippling through multiple dimensions. Perhaps, Winters replied, her form shimmering with possibility. That's because we're still becoming what that word will mean.